Welcome back to Killer Fun, where we explore the intersection of crime and entertainment every other week. I'm Christy, and Jackie and I are bringing to you today our final episode of Outtakes for our hiatus. We will be back with you with fresh, brand new episodes soon, but that doesn't mean that we don't have great, brand new, never before heard content right here for you today. Today, I have outtakes from both of our episodes on the Murdaugh Murders and Murder at the End of the World. So we're starting with Murdaugh Murders, Season 1, Episode 1, outtakes. Flubs, because there are flubs in all of these. We talk about how teaching authentic kindness is challenging and the effect of affluence on mental health. Enjoy. When binge drinking and patriarchy collide, evidently with the supports of a...
I'm silly. I hit my ring on the door, and it didn't hurt. I hit the ring, and it was just a small, and I said, ow. Why don't we do that?
I don't know.
We do that, right?
Habit? Yes,
Habit.
I've done it many times. I am constantly apologizing to the furniture.
Oh, me too.
Excuse me.
Yes.
I'm like, there's nobody there.
Yes.
I know this. I'm in my house.
I feel like we're well trained, and I think it's a habit that other of us could use, so that they would be more well trained for the situations that mattered.
I wish my children were as well trained, but I understand that my well trained also comes from from a bit of trauma.
Same.
So
Yeah, I know it's hard to like.
Yeah, and how do I teach these skills without perpetuating?
Yeah. How do I teach authentic kindness? Because if we have to overlook a lot as society to be able to function, but she wasn't wrong about some things. I think that's the torture.
Yeah, that's
right.
fair.
That's a little bit of the torture, but because of it, I also very much learned how to speak and, think about what I'm going to say. And I find that I put a lot of effort into caring about how other people are experiencing my space because they care about that. And they see that as just a trauma response. And I'm like, yeah, but do you know what it's like to be in your space right now? Does that matter? I don't know. Obviously ignorance is bliss, but I'm not ignorant to it. So, oh well. Balancing that can be hard.
That's the thing is I was always taught to think about how my actions affected others.
Absolutely. 100%.
Before I considered how my actions affected me.
Yeah. Yep.
And so I always do that.
I'm getting better about it in certain things.
Yeah.
But because it's not really consistent and because it's a personality change, it really throws people off. It can throw my family off.
Yeah.
Right? Because I'll all of a sudden it feels ridiculous that I'm making a stand about something. But I'm literally just trying to do the thing everybody else does all the time.
Yeah.
So then I feel
they're not used to that from you.
They're not used to it from me. So I'm like, see, this is a point. This is why I need to change. But they've got a little bit better at it, and so there's a little bit more support. We're all learning.
I mean, yes, we are all learning. My family has gotten better about it.
Yeah.
And most of the time I'm happy thinking about how things. I understand it's a trauma response.
It is very hard though, because you're like, but this is the good thing that came out of that. This is the thing that made me nicer than everybody else. This is the thing you actually like about me. So can we honor that?
Yeah, exactly. It's the thing I like about myself, and it makes me mad.
We need more whiskey in our coffee right now.
Okay, well, let's talk about Murdaughs, and then we can go have some whiskey with dinner or wine with dinner.
About the wine with dinner. We're gonna have to start a adult version of our cutouts, when Christy and Jackie get real, and it's gonna have to have an E next to it so that we can actually talk. It'll be our spinoff of things.
Because it's going to need its own feed, so that this one doesn't get flagged. Because you mark one E and the whole feed gets flagged.
Yeah, we'll start a total spinoff.
Okay. All right, so we've long recognized that. Oh no, that's the wrong one. Oh no, that's right. So we've long recognized that economic disadvantage can be a risk factor for mental illness.
Right.
Okay. So there was a lot of studies like in the mid-century of the 1900s where they studied middle class. Right?
Right.
Okay. And then they realized, oh, the poor people are having a different experience than we are. Maybe
Yes.
we should look at them. What has not been studied very well is affluent people because the researchers assumed that they were basically having a similar sort of experience to the middle class.
Yeah. Or they assumed that it was an opposite experience and that was their own bias.
Right.
Well, of course, the economically disadvantaged is having a trouble. That must mean that.
Yeah, it must mean.
Okay.
Yeah, it must mean that the rich people are fine.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
No.
No. Turns out.
More science, please.
Yeah. Yeah. So they did more science. Good. Yeah. I mean, I get it. Poor little rich kid.
I know.
But come on.
If you really want to understand, you have to look at all of the people involved.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. There tends to be, in the very affluent class, an inordinate emphasis on material success that can limit attainment of other rewards critical for well-being, such as close relationships.
Yep.
So you have upper middle class mothers who may give up a professional career in order to quote unquote stay home.
Right.
But because they're affluent, they also have help and find themselves, in order to maintain their social standing, because they don't have the gratification or the social standing provided to them by a job,
Right.
that they still have a nanny. They're still spending a lot of time away. These kids are still not having a close relationship with their mother. And that when you put the focus on material wealth, the fathers tend to be away a lot. They work late, they travel a lot. And so they're also sacrificing relationship, which we kind of see with Paul. He was super close to his nanny. When he was, the housekeeper. I don't know, whatever. She helped raise the kids. And he was closer probably with the nanny than he was with his mom.
Maybe so. Yeah.
Because she was very focused on the brother.
Well, yeah, performance. It's a high pressure.
Right.
High pressure to perform.
Yes.
And it can be so overwhelming to kids growing up in that culture, especially because then they know the outside society is looking at them saying, you must have it so easy. You must have it so easy. So there's this cultural misunderstanding. And then there's this idea that within the family, they're supposed to be high performers and do well.
Yes.
But then outside, they're looked at as nepotism.
Right.
And so it's like they do all the hard work to be that good. And then it's reduced to nepotism anyways.
Sometimes it's just they get a job that's unearned.
Well, sometimes that's true.
Yeah.
But like the assumption is that it's unearned just because it's family.
Right.
Except most affluent families grew up in a time where they were forced to be that excellent.
Right.
So actually the qualifications are actually good.
Yeah.
So it's really hard because you're right. We have this like, oh, poor little rich kid. But there is a high prevalence of overwhelm and anxiety and pressure. Yeah,
absolutely. And everybody wants to be liked. It's interesting that you bring that up because everybody wants to be liked, and yet there's this sort of like malicious pleasure that people get when they see somebody who's wealthy fall.
Yeah.
I mean. Oh, it's ugly. It's an ugly part of humanity.
It is an ugly part of humanity. It's a little bit about jealousy. It's a little bit about reconciling our ideals of, equity and value, and also still kind of loving being bougie.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. All of the sources that we use to inform our discussion here on Killer Fun Podcast can be found on our social media. Join us on Facebook at Killer Fun Podcast, exploring the intersection of crime and entertainment. You can find us on Twitter at Killer Fun Pod, or you can send us an email at killerfunpodcast@gmail.com, and I'd be happy to share a link to whatever information you're looking for. We love to hear from you. You might learn a little something too. All right, Murdaugh Murders Season 2, Episode 1. We had a lot more outtakes for this one. Opinions, we have them. We talk about Whiskey Fox and Whiskey Mike. Becky Hill, who is a very controversial figure at the moment because Alec Murdaugh is looking for a retrial and says that Becky Hill cost him his innocent verdict. We talk about her role and how normal is it. Maggie Murdaugh wasn't snobbish. This is so sweet. She was seemed like really decent, nice person by all accounts. But that's a little unusual. There are some possible psychological reasons why rich people tend to be a little elitist. Micro expressions can be misleading. Teens are fun. Why wasn't Buster Murdaugh involved in the documentary? We don't know, but we'd have liked to have seen it. And being rich isn't a get out of jail free card. Enjoy. You ready to talk about Murdaugh Murder?
Oh my God. I have so many opinions.
Oh, okay, good.
Okay. Yes, I am.
Okay. Alex is in the throes of dealing with criminal and civical.
Civical?
Start that again. So police reported gunshot victims. They said they had a whiskey fox and a whiskey Mike.
Yeah, I don't really know what that means.
You don't know what that means?
No,
Okay.
no.
So I did have to look it up.
Okay.
It's like military police shorthand. And it's WF and WM basically. And so when they say whiskey fox, they mean white female, and whiskey Mike is white male.
White male. Oh.
That
Well, that makes a lot more sense now.
Right, exactly. I'm like,
okay.
but if you're not police related,
You wouldn't
really
that.
know that.
And as much as we have been watching this stuff and we still have no clue.
Right.
But that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because if I was to see W period, M period, I would get that like on a
Yeah.
written.
Right.
But I did not.
And I can get why they use like this kind of shorthand while they're talking in case somebody is listening.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, and also to be clear. I mean, that's
Right.
what that alphabet means.
Right.
I'm not good at that because there's like the military version and then there's like the civilian business version. And then there's the things we make up based on like current versions. And I'm like, well, now I know nothing.
Yeah, right. Like I just pick, what if
Whatever.
I have to spell like C as in cookie?
Yeah. Like, something
What
clear.
do I think that I can say clear enough that somebody else can understand it?
Yeah, right. And business does a different thing because they don't want it to be military because that sounds like dire. So business has like a different version that
Right.
sounds very much more economic.
Right.
And,
Yes.
Right.
So Becky Hill was the clerk of court for Colleton County, and she was in charge of a ton. Is this normal?
I don't know. I felt like for a small town, it's probably normal. And for a big town, it's probably not.
Okay, so I would say that's probably pretty accurate.
Okay.
But I think that her role is not abnormal.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so it is a popularly elected 4-year term. Becky was elected for the first time in 2020.
Okay.
So she was relatively new to this. But the clerk of court, according to southcarolinacourts.org,
Okay.
are charged with docket management, receipt of fees, fines and costs, maintenance of all court records, submission of reports to a variety of state and federal agencies, and are involved in both criminal and civil matters.
Okay.
So it's a lot of
that
things.
makes sense then. Okay.
And, in a smaller county or smaller area.
She has less help.
Right. I think that's the thing.
That's the thing.
Is that she was in charge of a lot because they don't have a ton of assistance for her.
Right. So she actually physically had to do things that other bigger towns might have more teams for.
And she did have a team of people, have a team of people.
But, okay, that makes more sense. Yeah.
So Blanca, the housekeeper, was pleasantly surprised that Maggie wasn't prissy or a snob. And yet there may be reasons, like scientific, psychological reasons, why people are snobs when they're rich.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hit me with this.
There was a study published in the Association for Psychological Science, which is referenced in an article on Jezebel. Jezebel's way easier to read.
Yeah.
That's the one I'm going to talk about.
For real.
Basically, rich people don't rely on relationships as much because they don't have to.
They don't have to.
They can throw money at a problem.
That makes sense.
And they don't have to ask people for help. And they kind of lose sight of the fact that their resources allow them to throw money at a problem instead of asking for help. And they are used to their independence, and they forget that not everybody has the same ability to
That makes a lot
deal
of
with
sense.
their problems
Yeah,
that way.
that makes sense.
And then Wired had an article from 2019. Why are rich people so mean? He calls it, Christopher Ryan wrote the article, and he called it rich asshole syndrome. And everybody who's wealthy has a certain amount of fortune that, it's easy to look at people and say, oh, well, they worked their way. Yes, they did. But there was also a certain amount of circumstances that were beyond their control that allowed them to be able to work themselves out of poorness.
Right. Or amplified their results versus somebody else's hard work.
Yes. And he said a lot of the time it's because people who've worked this hard still feel unfulfilled. They're still chasing the thing.
Yeah.
And that this goes back to the community thing, that when we get some money, we tend to isolate. We stop taking the bus and buy a car. We move out of the noisy apartment.
And into the big house.
And into the house.
That's far away.
And then we end up with fewer chance encounters, fewer being exposed to music that we wouldn't choose ourselves necessarily. All these different things that would have happened.
Yeah.
And now they don't. And so people kind of forget again that they're missing out on something. They don't realize they're missing out on something because of the way that they're currently
that makes
living.
sense.
Yeah.
A lot of sense, actually.
And then this was really interesting. The University of Toronto had a researcher, Stéphane Cote, who found that typically we think of rich people as being maybe a little less generous than poor people because they'll give a smaller portion of their income
a smaller
others.
Portion, but a higher dollar amount.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. But it's really not so much about them being stingy. It's more about the wealth differential. So the greater the wealth differential is, the less they tend to give. So if the person that they're giving to looks like them in some way, then they feel more of a kinship and want to give more.
Well, and that's like basic sales.
Right.
Like that's sales. Create a rapport, they're going to get more out of it.
Yeah.
But yeah. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. A lot of sense.
Yeah. And so if they find that if there's a high disparity between the haves and the have-nots in a community, the haves are likely to give less.
Right.
But if they all tend to be a little more homogenous, then they have a little more empathy. It's easier for them to make that leap.
Right. Which is why, yeah. Boy, that's a whole subject, right?
Yep. And then, of course, the fear microexpressions.
Yeah.
Not microaggressions. May indicate lying.
Yeah.
It may indicate that they're having tummy trouble.
I mean, that's the thing, right? I mean, there are some others that people notice that are a little bit more attributed to emotion. So, for instance, flaring the nostrils is more of a disgust. If you're noticing that through a conversation, that's a red flag to consider along with other clues. But because there's not really much else to be flaring nostrils at, unless they just literally have some allergies, in which case, okay, fine. But, so like, those kind of things. But there are some of those body language things we know about, like crossing your, but I cross my arms all the time. It means nothing. It means I have back pain.
Yeah.
Actually. So,
And that's
and
it.
that's
If
a
you're
problem.
sitting in an uncomfortable chair, that can affect some
let
of
me
these things.
tell you a story.
Oh, please do.
Okay. So we were going overseas. So you have to get like a medical evaluation of things. So I went to like a psychiatrist. Okay. At preparing to go overseas because like I have a thing. And so it's like, okay, let's make sure that you're fine. I was good, but I was like, yes, let's do the evaluation so I could go overseas with my husband. Okay.
Yeah.
I can admit that. So here we are. I'm pregnant. Okay. I'm literally pregnant. It's like I'm in that like space between the first and second trimester.
Okay.
Right? Where things are, I'm still a little sicky. But also I'm a little less sicky, but also a little more uncomfortable because now things are really starting to change.
Right.
So I go to the psychiatrist, right? He keeps me waiting for a while. Okay. But I don't want to go potty because it's like, well, as soon as I go, then I'm not going to be here. And I keep going through that. You know how it is.
Yeah.
So anyways, I end up waiting and he calls me in and he has this sofa that is like on the floor almost and super soft and supposed to be very comfy unless you're pregnant and still
and need to pee.
So, and also I hadn't slept well, right? Because, well, we're at that stage where I'm like, where do I put my belly? I don't really know. Anyway, so, but I'm not really showing enough.
Right.
So I'm sitting, I get into this sofa and I'm all like, my hips,
fidgety.
God, like, and I gotta go potty. And I'm like, I'm all comfortable. And I'm just, and so the psychiatrist asked me questions, and I'm clearly being a little short with him because he was late.
Yeah.
And I'm grumpy, and I probably need to eat. I don't know, like 100 things are going
right.
And this guy looks at me and he goes, "Well, I'm very concerned for you because it seems like we might be dealing with a little bipolar."
What?
First of all, I have my degree in psychology, and so you don't even know enough about me to know I'm pregnant. Okay?
Yeah.
So I very few times in my life have ever actually stood up for my own self in the moment. Usually I'm very like passive.
Yeah.
And I talk a big game when I'm at home. So basically I'm a chihuahua. Okay. All right. So, but this one time I was a pit bull.
Awesome.
I was, because hormones help me. I looked at this guy and was like, you don't know what you're talking about.
Oh,
You don't know because you don't even recognize the fact that I'm pregnant right now. I'm pregnant and sitting in this stupid sofa that's so low, and you kept me waiting, and so I have to go to the bathroom. I'm fidgety because I have to go to the bathroom, and none of those symptoms actually overlap with bipolar.
Did he say cleared?
Yeah, basically. I said, so I think I'm all set, and I think I'm good to go.
Yeah.
And I left. I was like, I don't care what they forced me to do afterwards. I have such a case. Yeah,
Right.
but they didn't ask me to go anywhere else.
Oh, good.
Cleared.
Yeah.
Paperwork cleared. Command
Cleared.
sponsored. Go to Korea, please. Thank you very much. You think?
Good for you.
Thank you.
I felt very, very mature, especially since we didn't have a baby for 5 years. And
Yeah.
that was like perfect for us. I mean, we did all of the growing up adventures.
Yeah, I
know?
tried.
Yeah.
But
yeah, things happen.
but things happen. So, it's all good.
All right.
It is all good.
It is.
It does work out the way
you have
you should.
wonderful children.
I'm
So,
happy.
Yeah.
Like we were just talking about last night. Like, this might end up on a bonus episode. We were just talking about last night how, like, okay, well, we did have kids pretty young and all of that stuff, but also now we're this age and our kids are that age, and it's super fun.
Yeah. It's so much more. I love having teenagers.
Yeah, I do too. I love them.
I loved my babies. Don't get me wrong.
Don't get me wrong,
But I so much prefer teenagers.
they're so fun. They're funny. They make me laugh.
Yes.
Yeah, it's great.
Exactly. Then there was another guy. This guy didn't get defended.
My question is Buster involved at all?
That's an excellent question to ask.
And why didn't we investigate that?
Was it a straw man that the documentarians decided not to include, or was that something they didn't have enough evidence of?
But why wouldn't Buster participate?
Oh, because it's his dad, and he still believes his dad is innocent.
I know. So there's his voice.
Yeah.
His voice of support.
Yeah. I would have liked to have heard it. I did read
sure.
the article real quick. You'd kind of mentioned that to me. And
I
I'm like,
kind of did.
Where was he?
Where was he? And I know that they said that he was like not there, but
He was 200 miles away at his apartment with his girlfriend.
That's what we think.
That's
we
what
know.
he says. Now, He thinks that the case against his dad wasn't fair. But he also said in a Fox Nation documentary, which he did participate in, so maybe that would be interesting to check out, but that calling his father a psychopath is a fair assessment.
Interesting. Or projection.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I digress. Yeah. But that's like my whole like.
You're like wild theory.
Killer
maybe
fun.
Somebody else did it. While rich people seem to get away with crime more often, there's really only so much being rich can do for you once you're caught.
Yeah.
So the Eagle Online is the American University newspaper, and Zachary Andrews wrote an opinion piece, but I thought it had some good points.
Interesting.
He was arguing with a friend of his, or not arguing, they were having a debate about how rich people can get away with crime more because they have the best lawyers.
Well, yeah. I mean, I have to agree with that.
Yes and no, because there's only so much even the best defense lawyer can do for you once you're caught. He gave the example that if you shoot somebody in cold blood and it's premeditated, a good attorney is maybe going to be able to say it wasn't premeditated and get it to be a lesser charge. But your butt's still going to prison.
Right. I mean, I can understand that.
Sure.
But also, like, they do pay for lawyers who can think more clearly about and think more creatively because they have larger teams.
Sure.
Which research absolutely supports, creates more ideas and better outcomes to put forth a defense argument that creates a shadow of a doubt.
Sure.
Or a reasonable doubt.
Sure. Absolutely. But there are plenty of cases where people have spent a lot of money on their defense.
Yeah, and it didn't work at all.
It didn't help them very much at all. So Phil Spector, who was a music producer and self-made millionaire by the age of 21, he spent nearly 20 years in prison for shooting an actress in his home when she turned down his romantic advances. And it wasn't like he got released. He died in prison. So, it didn't help him. Michael Skakel, who is the cousin of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., was convicted of the murder of a teen 27 years after the murder occurred. The conviction was upheld on several appeals. In 2018, it was vacated by the Connecticut Supreme Court on a technicality because they thought it was going to be retried.
Ooh.
And they ended up not retrying it. That said, he spent a very, very long time in prison.
Yeah.
So maybe, yes, it mitigated it a little bit by having this very exclusive, expensive defense.
Who could keep going and find the loophole and find the technicality.
Yeah, find the technicality, but he still spent decades in prison.
Right.
So there's only so much they can do. And then the Menendez brothers.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they shot their parents. Men claimed that they were about to expose their father's sexual, emotional, and physical abuse, and they were defending themselves, but the lies and excessive spending that they told about where they were and the behavior after the murders basically got them convicted.
Yeah, see, they're not sociopaths.
Right.
And so here's the thing. You have to be likable and also have all the money.
Oh, there you go.
Right?
Yeah.
This is why people who are super likable and get like public attorneys still sort of seem to get
away with it.
Or at least get it mitigated somehow.
Yeah.
And then you have your true sociopaths who still have the book thrown at them, but somehow have big fan bases.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And finally, our outtakes from Murder at the End of the World. We talk about Britt Marling, who's one of the creators of the show, who also created the OA. So we chat about the OA a little bit. The Float Valley brings up Antarctica. We talk about an Icelandic comedian and how small the population of Iceland really is. We do some coffee calculus. Is the Midas list real? Serial killers and law enforcement. Empty homes can be targets for nefarious activity, and there are hot springs in San Antonio. and Joy. And Britt Marling is Lee Anderson, and she's one of the creators of the show.
Okay,
And
I
she
didn't know that.
Also created the OA on Netflix, which she starred in as Prairie Johnson.
Okay, see, I watched a handful. Of OA.
I liked the first season a lot, even though it was trippy and kind of weird, but kind of in a good way.
Yeah.
And the second season was less pulling in. It pulled me
less
in
trippy and weird.
Yeah. It was still trippy and weird, but in a way that was less positive, I think.
Oh, okay.
A little more unsettling in the way that it was unusual.
I remember there was something about it I really didn't like. Okay. There was some element of it that I felt like, oh, that's just the easy, obvious. And I'm like, oh, Trope City. Oh. I don't know, something about it. But I feel like maybe I was watching other shows that had sort of that similar sci-fi kind of, CW feel. And I kind of maybe just compared them.
Okay.
And they shouldn't have been compared.
No, that's fair.
Yeah, maybe so.
That's fair. Well, because it was very up in the air as to how much of it was her mental illness and how much of it was actually something, what's that word for when something is mystical or otherworldly? There's a word for it, but I can't remember.
Metaphysical?
Yeah. Metaphysical things, or I don't know.
Yeah.
Another
supernatural.
Word. Supernatural. Yeah. What was beyond our realm of understanding? How much of that was actually that, and how much of it was, watching the descent of a woman into madness.
Okay, and so maybe that's the trope I didn't like.
Maybe.
Is this trope of always trying to dangle the carrot of they're just insane. They're just crazy. And I'm like, I'm kind of like, either make a story about somebody who's mentally ill or make a supernatural story. It's that like, Oh,
I kind of liked in the first season, I kind of liked the play in between because.
Yeah, did you?
Yeah, because there was, the dancing, the ritual dancing that they had to do or something.
Yeah.
And she had all these very diverse set of people that did it, and it was so interesting. I kind of liked that.
I kind of
liked
play.
The idea that she might be mentally ill, but she was so kind and positive that people still really wanted to believe in it, and it wasn't hurting anybody. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like a cult in the way that she was benefiting monetarily from it. It was cultish, but it was in the most kind and gentle way.
Interesting. Okay.
I thought that
I might have given up too soon.
Maybe.
But I definitely, I guess I just don't prefer that.
Sure.
Walking that line between the mental illness and the supernatural.
Sure.
However, there are, maybe it's because, again, I'm comparing, there's some classics like Event Horizon.
Oh, yeah.
But at the end of the day, we're talking about a supernatural thing that is driving people mad, not is it a supernatural thing, or are they just in a delusion?
Mm-hmm. Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Maybe.
Anyway.
Maybe.
Oh, that'll be in a bonus episode, I think.
I think so. I think we digress.
Yeah. A lot.
I digress.
This is not a show about the OA.
Not at all.
Not this episode.
But we were talking about Brit and that brought up some stuff.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, back to this show.
The Float Valley is one of the last great wildernesses. Mm-hmm. So Andy put a hotel on it.
Okay, you're opening up my big question I've had forever. Yeah. Okay, and so I'm going to qualify this. This might go on a bonus episode. I'm going to qualify this by saying I believe in climate change. Okay,
yeah,
I do. I see the science. I know that this is happening. Yada yada yada. I do. So don't come at me, anybody that's listening to what I'm about to say. But there was some logical questions I asked early on when the science about global warming, as we called it then, was coming out.
Right.
And some of the science and the research that was being presented at the time offered data sets about temperature from Antarctica. And then they would show the research base that they had bought, or built, I should say, and all of this stuff, and airstrips where not giant planes, but some fairly large-ish planes, which also means that they had to have some A1 fuel available for getting out and all of this stuff. And I'm like, well, then of course it's melting.
Yeah, yes, because you flew a giant plane.
You are flying the thing that causes the problem in the air. You've landed it on our Antarctica. You're the problem. And they're like, we're the problem. And I'm like, yes, you're the problem. Get off, get out, leave. Stop landing planes that use jet fuel on Antarctica. The data sets are corrupted. So for a long time, I was like, I get what you're saying about global warming, but those studies, I need to know more about that. Like, I need to know how what you're doing isn't causing the problem that you're reporting.
Right.
That's what I gotta know.
That's fair.
It's fair, right? If you're landing planes.
It's fair.
Even if you're landing helicopters. Yeah. I don't care what it is.
Anything that uses fossil fuels.
And you know what else they do? They take ships down there that have icebreakers on the front.
Breaking ice.
So they can break through ice to then hike. So I don't know. Did they do enough research to know what their footprint would actually end up causing and what kind of snowball effect?
That's right.
To be punny. Okay. But I believe in climate change.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. Yeah. Right. It's only Iceland. It's a very small place.
It is a small place. Watched a comedian who was from Iceland, and he had very funny jokes about how tiny Iceland really is. And
it's tiny. Like, a lot of Air Force people got stationed there, because they have a little base there.
Yeah.
And but people always are like, oh my gosh, I got orders to Iceland. And then people who came back from Iceland are always like, that place is great.
It's amazing.
It's amazing.
There. Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah. Like they have there's like a 50,000 people. It's like, I don't know, 550,000 people population.
Oh my gosh.
Something like that. And they're like, it's a small place when they're like, everybody really wants you to know about those 50,000 people. Like these tens of thousands of people like really, really matter in our population. That's funny. It's not like, it's 300 million
small
in the
continent
US.
living, whatever.
Exactly. Exactly. Anything before we?
Nah, I'm good.
Okay. Yeah, I know. It's the calculus. Do I want more coffee? Do I need more coffee? I always kind of want more coffee.
I always want more coffee.
But sometimes maybe I shouldn't.
I don't know. It's just a matter of how bad I want to pee at the end of this.
Yeah. Okay.
That's what engaging. Bladder to coffee cup.
Yeah. There. Okay. Good to know.
Put that in the bonus episode.
I was going to say, that's a calculus that we have to do eventually.
This is the true behind the scenes. Right? Because if I take the break to go get the coffee, it's time.
Right.
Yeah. It's a whole thing.
I do. I understand.
Okay.
All right.
Right. I talk to me. Yes, do I?
I talk to me all the time.
I do indeed. Actually, talk to me self. No.
All right. Does Forbes have a list of venture capitalists called the minus list?
I feel like they made that up.
Okay.
But
I thought they made it up too, but they did not.
It's true?
Okay, they don't call them venture capitalists. It's tech investors.
Okay.
It's
still venture capitalism, yeah. Mm-hmm.
6 of one, half dozen of the other.
Right.
It is venture capitalists. Now, they have the list that they've been running with the current methodology since 2011.
Okay.
So there is a 100
wow.
tech
I really
investors
didn't
to watch, and they had it before then. They ran the last one in 2009, and then they rebooted it in 2011 because it had different methodology.
Okay.
From what I can understand.
That's interesting. Well, I've definitely never had any reason to look at that.
Nope.
So, of course, I don't know that it exists.
Right. But I thought, I'm like, that is made up.
Yeah.
Nope. It's not.
Okay.
I just don't run in those circles.
Nope. Don't run in those circles at all. Okay. Well, very cool.
Darby and Bill suspect that the serial killer that they've been chasing was associated with law enforcement.
Yeah. I mean, likely.
I mean, possibly.
I mean, I'd go along with that.
Sure. But I mean, that was part of the reason of their calculus of not talking to law enforcement about looking in this particular place because they thought they wouldn't care and also
protect one of their own.
Yeah, exactly. Wikipedia has 39 people in this category.
Oh.
They're from all over the world.
I'm sure.
But I was like, 39, that seems like a lot. So, or maybe not very many. I don't know.
I can't tell.
I don't know.
Well, serial killer, that's a certain category.
This is true.
So if we're talking about criminals overall, that number might change.
Yeah.
But to talk about serial killers, I could imagine that would be the number.
Right.
I don't, because they do have a lot of psychological tests they do on officers.
Sure.
It'd take a long time for an officer to be able to, like BTK level.
Okay, so that was one of the ones I was going to mention.
Okay.
Like he was a compliance officer and a dog catcher, so it's law enforcement adjacent. And also he worked for ADT Security for many, many years. Mm-hmm. The Golden State Killer, Joseph James D'Angelo. He was a police officer in the 70s while he was active in Northern California. Those are the big ones. But then there was Robert Neil Rodriguez. He was in the Portland Police Bureau for 2 years. Gerald Johnson Schaefer was a police officer in Florida. Anthony Sully was a police officer in California for 8 years, but was no longer a police officer when he started his killing.
Look at 2 years, this, that, see what I'm saying? Like, they don't last that long.
They don't last that long.
No.
Yeah.
No. And I think if Dennis Rader had been actually a police officer, he wouldn't last that long either, because the police officers already had some feelings about him.
Right.
But not enough to be concerning so that it was still a surprise.
Right.
But who would think? I mean, if you find somebody who seems a little off, your brain shouldn't just go to serial killer.
I mean,
right?
Right, because really serial killers are a very small percentage of
very rare.
Very rare. All right, so Darby and Bill went into that home for sale that used to be the serial killer's abode, and that it was empty, made it easier. And empty homes are indeed a magnet for theft and vandalism, trespassing and squatters. They're also ripe for system failures and neglecting maintenance. Little things that you see, a leaky toilet, you get it fixed. If you don't notice it, then it becomes a problem. And I didn't know this. You may need a separate policy on your home if it's left vacant. Now, if you go on vacation for a few weeks,
that's different.
It's
when it's a vacant.
Like even if it's staged, but if there's no one living there, your regular homeowner's insurance isn't going to cover it like you would like them to. See, if you're going to move out of a home and leave it vacant and it's going to sit vacant for a while, more than a couple of weeks, you need to contact your insurer because you need them to cover the property, the home itself, and liability. If somebody were to break into your home and get hurt, they can sue you even though they broke in. And
you might have to have a lawyer to get them out.
Yes, because if they just squat
for long enough.
Yeah, like
it's
30
theirs.
days. Yeah.
Yep.
Because it bridges the tectonic plates, which is like super cool because it makes these geothermal pools, but also earthquakes and magma on roads.
Yeah, that's like scary. But I do like a good hot spring.
I mean,
I got the chance to do it in Korea, but you know what? We have one here in San Antonio.
What?
In the city. And they've reopened it, and it's really super cool. And you can make a reservation, and it's just like, okay, we have the San Pedro Springs pool that used to be Spring Fred.
Right.
Okay. Well, in the same vein, they've basically just retapped into this, and it's now a geothermal spring fed. Yeah, like hot tubs, hot pools, and like there's a restaurant and a bar, and like there's like a whole thing. Yeah.
Why haven't we done this?
I don't know. because I don't know, but it's also priority number. Well, it should be number one because this hotel in Iceland is not going to happen. So let's put that at the top of the to-do list. Yes, please.
Okay.
Wow. It's really not even that expensive. I mean, considering.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we're going to do that. All right. That is the end of our outtakes for this hiatus. We hope that you enjoyed them. We had a great time making them. It was fun to release on a slightly more aggressive schedule than normal. We are headed back to our normal release schedule of every other week. And we are going to be talking some really true crime covered in a documentary where the victims participate. So we feel good about this one because they are telling their own story. American Nightmare on Netflix. Holy smokes. It's a wild ride. Thanks so much for listening. We know you make a choice. We don't just come on the radio. You choose to download and stream and listen, and we so appreciate it. Tell a friend because it's way more fun when you can listen with a friend. And until next time, be safe, be kind, and wash your hands.
Da, 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 da.